Well, welcome to this new Veeam webinar where we're considering Microsoft 365 backup checklist for 2024. I'm your host, David Howell, the Editor-in-Chief here at Silicon UK. More organizations are protecting Microsoft 365 data than ever before. Even if you already have a backup solution, you can learn today how you can augment that existing strategy for continued success this year. This presentation also gives you, more information about the number one Microsoft 365 backup solution, which is Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. Well, to talk about all of that and to give us I think it's going to be an insightful presentation, is Blake Rumfitt, the Senior Systems Engineer at Veeam Software. Well, welcome, Blake.
Thank you, David. Nice to be here. Thank you for your time.
Well, thanks for joining us. I think this one's very interesting. I think obviously everyone pretty much is using 365 these days. I think the idea that you also have a backup solution for that application, that may be something new for a lot of businesses. And of course, data these days is absolutely precious. And of course, what you're using within the 365 environment is also very important to protect as well. Often, that environment is a focus for threat actors and all the rest of that. So the data that you're backing up within the system, I think, is very important. So I think the presentation today, Blake, is going to be interesting, timely, and I think something that a lot of people listening to this would like to really find out more about, because I think 365 as a secure environment, I think is absolutely important for businesses. Now, you do have a presentation for us, which is great. So it's not just us talking about the subject. So I'd like to hand over to you, Blake. We'll probably have a conversation as we go. I think I've had a look at your slides, and some of them are quite detailed. So I might ask you to maybe unpack a little bit as we go, just to give our listeners and watchers maybe a bit more detail. But I'd like to hand over the stage to you, Blake. So if you'd like to kick off your presentation, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, David. So we've heard it, we hear it all the time. We see it in the news, we see it in the paper, in the media. The threats are ever increasing for organizations like yourself, and most importantly, your peers and your competition. One thing which is often overlooked is actually, where do a significant amount of these vulnerabilities come from? We're looking at some of these statistics, which have recently been carried out through an ESG survey. Most alarmingly, 80% of all vulnerabilities have been discovered in Microsoft 365 data.
Yeah.
More often than not, this is just something as modest as just a phishing email. We're all aware of these. We know what to look out for. But it just takes that off day, that moment where you've let your guard down, and all of a sudden you click on that link, and then you've compromised your laptop, and most importantly, your organization's data.
Absolutely.
And actually, as part of this survey, what really came to light is that over half of the customers surveyed felt that they would lose data if there were any attack or if there was any corruption in their SaaS application. Mm-hmm. And only a quarter of these customers actually felt confident that they had a robust and comprehensive strategy on protecting this data, and they could recover all the data. And actually, David, this is a great slide because it really shows that customers are starting to understand the importance of protecting their Microsoft 365 data. Certainly in the past, but actually quite alarmingly, there's still some customers out there, which we can see down here, which is still relying on their recycle bin. They're still relying on being able to roll back from a previous version. But actually, reality is that recycle bin's only going to be in place for 30 days or 60 days. So if we look over the past 4 years, we can see that people are starting to appreciate that they're responsible for the data.
Absolutely. To be honest, Blake, when I saw this slide a couple of days ago, I couldn't believe that was even on the slide. People are using a recycle bin as part of their backup strategy, or at least as a not even a fallback, as absolutely part of their recovery, which I found unbelievable, to be honest.
Yeah, and not only have you got that challenge that if it's over 60 days, what do you do with the data? But actually, from a governance, from a compliance and an auditing standpoint, actually that organization may be holding data which is in governance in line with GDPR regulations and requirements, where they need to retain it for 7 years. So you can't rely on the cycle bin. So at Veeam, we've got a number of different solutions. So the first is absolutely the market leading, and it's around Veeam Backup from Microsoft 365. And this is the conventional software only, where you're responsible as an end user, as a customer, for downloading that software, for designing and architecting the solution, around understanding what that starting point is. How much data do you have in 365 based on the change requirements, based on the growth requirements, based on the retention? How do you then size the backup storage, so the backup destination? And then also with the software only approach, you're responsible naturally to maintain it, to grow, to scale the environment, and also patch the software. And then, yeah.
I think that's very interesting, because I think a lot of I would imagine when you're talking to your customer base, let's do what we need to do. Let's secure 365. Let's look at the backups. Let's look at how we look at legacy and all the rest of it. But I would imagine the first question you often ask is, well, have you done the data audit? Have you looked at the data that's within the 365 environment, and have you understood where it is? And can we back that up securely? And more importantly, if we do back that up, can we recover from it? Because it's all about the recovery. That often gets forgotten, I think, in the equation. It's about the recovery. So is it often the case that they haven't really done, I guess, an in-detailed audit of their data? That's the starting point before you start looking at, well, where are we going to put this? How are we going to back it up? All within the 365 environment. But data auditing, it's absolutely first step.
Yeah. Absolutely. And with any of our solutions, which I'll come on to the other options, full audit trail as well. So you can see every single task which is carried out by your restore operators, by the backup administrators. So you're going to meet that compliance. But this isn't necessarily a legacy approach. I would say the software only approach is still relevant to certain customers which have that strict governance you mentioned, where they need to keep, for example, an on-site copy of the data. They need to meet strict data governance requirements, so they can go down the software only approach. But actually, David, one thing which we did at Veeam is, like many organizations, we listen to our customers, we go to conferences, we do webinars, we get the feedback. And actually, to a lot of companies out there, it just seems to go against the grain that they've got this as a service offering with Microsoft, Microsoft 365, and you're having a conversation with them around scaling it out, around how to design it, what does the storage look like, when actually in reality customers just want a turnkey solution. They don't want to manage the infrastructure, they don't want to feed and water that, they just want a quick time to live, they just want to create a backup job, be able to restore it, and as you mentioned, have a full audit trail and make sure that that environment is in line with best practices, and they don't have to worry about that. So with Veeam, we have a backup as a service offering, which is called Veeam Data Cloud. And that would meet these requirements. So this is around the green section here is us as Veeam after this. And then this would be down to yourselves to take care of the backups, the restores, and then make sure that that's meeting the required SLAs through the required scheduling.
Indeed.
And then the third option we have here, David, is our fast ecosystem of VCSPs. So that's Veeam Cloud Service Providers, who can tailor a solution, again in line with Veeam best practices. They look after, they manage, they support the environment, but it gives you much greater flexibility. So again, if you're wanting a backup as a service offering, because like many IT organizations, you're having to do more with less every single day. So you don't have time to manage this infrastructure.
Absolutely. In fact, oddly enough, I've just written that something there on my pad. That idea that we're trying to reduce and collapse our tech stacks to make them leaner, agile, less complex. Let's remove the complexity. And that's exactly what you can do. You can choose from any of these solutions. So if you do want a managed service, absolutely. From an existing, that's available. But the idea that you can remove the complexity but still have the advantages of robust backup solutions for 365, that's absolutely important. And that's that's a kind of I guess it's a bespoke solution, isn't it? That's what it occurred to me. It doesn't matter what your business is trying to do. These solutions are flexible, so you can choose whatever's good for your tech stack. But again, if you're trying to reduce the complexity, absolutely fine. You can absolutely do that, but you're not going to lose any of the benefits because of you're not going to reduce that. It's always going to be there for you. And of course, as we'll see later on, it's expandable and flexible as your business changes.
Yeah, certainly. And finally, on the service providers, so again, they could offer anything as comprehensive as a fully managed environment where they take care of the backups and the restores, so you don't have to worry about it. But most importantly, with the managed service providers, or service providers rather, they could offer a solution which is tailored to meet your needs. Yeah. So they could give you different storage offerings as well. So you wouldn't just be tethered, for example, for our native Veeam offering, we're using Azure storage, as well as naturally Microsoft 365. But if you do have a requirement where you need to take an additional copy on-premise, a private cloud, or a different hyperscaler, then certainly our service community, our managed service providers and our partner community can do an offering around that. Mm-hmm. And this slide really expands on that. So what dictates what one of the three options you go for? Well, there's many options. And the first choice is really down to what's the business requirement and what's the appetite from IT. So do they want to build and manage the infrastructure? Or actually, if we just look at the storage platforms, this is also going to drive the choice. So if you want full control of the environment, you want full flexibility and where that backup data is going to reside, then maybe a software approach may be best for your organization. Or actually, if you don't need the data outside Azure, then you can go with Veeam's Data Cloud for a backup as a service offering. And then finally, around that one, which we just touched on, around our Veeam cloud service providers, they're going to offer you a managed service or a backup as a service in any of these options, if not more. And then they can wrap services around it as well.
Yes, again, build the service, but your business needs. You don't have to bend to the, you often see that, didn't you, a lot of the time with managed services in the early days, that you kind of had to fit around them. This is the infrastructure. You have to change your systems or your infrastructure to fit us, and that's completely changed now. It's a case of, well, you tell us what you need, and we are flexible enough to be able to deliver that.
Certainly. And David, at the forefront of any Veeam solution, security is absolutely top priority.
Indeed.
And when we talk around backups, of course, we always talk around having multiple copies of the data. Mm-hmm. Those copies of data need to be immutable. So again, if that bad actor gets into the environment, if any accounts are compromised, for example, we need to ensure that that data can't be deleted, can't become corrupt, or more importantly, in the interest of, for example, a ransomware attack, that bad actor can't go after the backup repository or the backup destination, and can't encrypt it and hold you at ransom for a significant fee. So regardless of what offering it is, be it the software, as a service, or through our partners, we offer immutable storage in multiple different levels. And that could be the initial backup, that could be a backup copy, and that could be on-premise, that could be in the cloud, or that could be a private cloud. So we've got a huge amount of options when it comes to immutable storage. And again, that's going to also dictate and potentially which offering you go for as well.
Do you also find a lot of your customer bases, they're still having the hybrid approach. They're still on-prem. Absolutely, no one has wholesale moved to the cloud. Some people have maybe, but I think generally speaking, not so much. That's hybrid approach, if that is clearly your infrastructure, and that's going to go forward. Now, these kinds of flexible services are ideal because you can, as you say, you can decide how you do that. Where is the immutables going to be? Is it going to be on-prem, somewhere else? Is it going to be in the cloud? You choose again. You don't have to bend to the vendor's will. It's up to you. You decide. If that's your infrastructure, these kinds of 365 backup solutions will fit around you. So if you're, for instance, going to maybe evolve your hybrid systems forward, you might be going to make some changes. For instance, these are ideal because you have several different kinds of ways of, I guess, delivering these kinds of services. So if you do make a change, these services can move with you. And I really quite like that because you don't see that a great deal. Often it's one service, it fits this particular scenario. If you change, well, it's not going to fit, guys. Whereas these kind of, because you have a literally sort of 3-tier approach, that gives you the flexibility I think everybody in business is trying to do, particularly IT, as that evolves forward.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. And then the next thing which we need to take in consideration is around having data separation. So what do we mean by this? Well, when we start talking about as a service offerings, it's vitally important that you as an organization have got faith that your data is ring-fenced from any other customer data. And certainly, irregardless of what offering you have, this is going to be followed up with best practices to ensure that everything's locked down with minimum least privileges access required, and that again it's going to be an immutable copy.
Yep.
And you need to ensure ultimately a backup is an insurance policy. You need to ensure that you can recover the data, it can be called upon in the worst case scenario. And with Veeam, we've got multiple different recovery options which we can come on to later, all the usual ones you would expect. Vast amount of options into different locations, downloading locally or doing a batch download in the background. And actually, your comment earlier, David, around hybrid, we're still seeing it actually with Microsoft 365. So vast amount of customers have aggressively moved all their core workloads, Exchange, Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint into 365.
Yeah.
Still those sticky workloads. For example, SharePoint, we quite often come across users who've got vast amounts of unstructured data residing in SharePoint, and they've just got concerns about transferring this vast amount of data up into 365. So when it comes to a Microsoft 365 backup solution, particularly in this hybrid approach, you need to ensure that the solution is going to be able to protect both of these through one console, through one application. It's no good having point siloed backup infrastructures for the same workloads, even if they're in different locations. So it's around...
Yes, I think it's all about removing that complexity. Obviously, businesses are swimming in data and they want to try and understand where it is. Particularly, they want to connect siloed information. A lot of it is unstructured as well, which doesn't help. But I think the light bulb's gone on maybe a couple of years ago. That data really has to be, I guess, corralled properly, looked at, really for commercial advantage, of course, but also let's look at that as, I guess, one of our most important assets. And if we're going to do that, how do we protect it? Of course, 365 has been around for a while, as you say. SharePoints have become well bloated in some cases, and because there was no real strategy for saving that data. So if you are going to look at, I guess, a 365 backup solution, it's kind of an ecosystem. It's something you put in place that can do all those things for you. But again, remove the complexity and give you really the peace of mind that you understand where the data is. And again, it can be accessed very, very easily. And it could be highly sensitive data, of course. Again, goes back to your audit. All data isn't of equal value, is it? So again, look at what do you have, and that becomes your data backup solution, or at least that's your strategy for using these kinds of tools.
Yeah, absolutely. And the next thing is, when it comes to protecting the environment, it's around having different options. So every customer is going to have the same requirements. They're not going to have the same business requirements, the same SLAs, which we can come onto a bit more detail on the next slide.
Sure.
But it's around having flexibility. So actually, if you're a small organization, SMB, for example, you're not worried about granularity. You might want to just do a quick catch-all approach and just set up a backup job, generic job, to capture all of those core Microsoft 365 workloads, actually protect the entire organization, all the users, all the groups and all those workloads under one backup policy. Or actually, if you're a large complex environment, maybe you've got a requirement where you need to create backup jobs for each respective workload, for example, Exchange, Teams or SharePoint, or maybe actually just having separate policies for different users. A good example we hear quite often is actually people want to exclude C-level and they want to have a separate backup policy relating to these VPs.
I think access is an interesting one, isn't it? I talk to a lot of businesses, and that's kind of what that's the approach they're kind of using. They're trying to look at, well, who do we allow access to this data? What's that going to look like? And that's going to be different for different teams or even individuals, because you can go down to an individual level if you want to, and then protect the data based on those credentials. I think if you do that work, then you understand who has access and therefore what kind of security you need to put in place. I think that's important. If you do those two things, then your data will be safe, and you'll only give access to the people that you need access to. And again, that's a strong case for really good security policies.
Yep, certainly. And the next section is really expanding out on what are those requirements? What's the drivers? So you as a backup administrator, you need to understand what are those business SLAs? So how often do we need to be taking, for example, a backup? What does the schedule look like? Well, this is going to be defined by two main metrics, which are what we can see here. So the first is around the backup frequency. How often do we need to take these? And this is going to be in line with the recover point objective. Then the next thing you need to have confidence in, are you going to be able to meet the recovery time objective? How long is it going to take to recover that data? So of course, if it's just an individual user, if it's just an attachment, it's going to take no time at all. But there's certainly a few considerations there. And again, you need to have flexibility in a solution where you can tailor these to meet those requirements. And then we've touched on the importance of recovery. This is your insurance policy. You need to have confidence that those restores can be when and where you need it to. So actually with any Veeam solution, you can see here, this is actually just focusing on the number of options available for exchange for your email data. You can naturally restore back to the original location, which is what you'd expect with a backup recovery solution. But also we've got a number of different options. So if you were, for example, a secretary trying to track down that killer slide deck, which the VP have been working on, actually maybe you want to pass the onus back to the end users to a self-service portal, so as that secretary can search for it themselves, because maybe they feel they're going to be able to get the data quicker, rather than relying on a ticket being logged with IT, having to wait for them to pick up the request, analyze it, put a response back. And I've been a backup administrator myself. Sometimes it can be frustrating because you have a rather vague request trying to find some information. They're not too sure what exactly the name of the slide was or who it was from, when it was. So it can take you time to search through. So again, when it comes to recoverability, it's having the options for not only the backup administrator to carry out the restores, but also passing the onus back to the end users if it's appropriate. And then it's having all the flexibility on recovering back to different mailboxes, downloading locally, and then also restricting that through strict role-based permissions as well.
Yes, I think it also improves ultimately efficiency. If you do want to go back to the original location, fine. But if someone did say, well, actually, could you move this to a different location? Actually, could you export this as HTML, for instance? Can you do that? Well, yes, that's absolutely possible. Massive improvement in efficiency because you have the options. Without this kind of solution, well, it's whatever the original format was that may not be accessible for the actual end user you're trying to recover it for. Which again is a nightmare. Yeah, okay, we've got to do file conversions and all the rest of it. Having the option, I think, is it may seem a very small thing, but actually over time, that can be a huge efficiency gain.
Yeah. And actually, that's a great introduction into the benefits around that. So you mentioned around time saving. So again, as a backup administrator, We're all having to do many more tasks. We've got tight timelines as well and schedules. There's less in the team. So really, you want to command and conquer your time, don't you? You want to be able to pass some of that onus back to the end users. But most importantly, as an administrator, you want to be freed up for more proactive projects, more meaningful projects. And a self-service portal is going to give you that option. And from a security standpoint, again, leading the way on any Veeam solution, it's all around ensuring that if any of those accounts are compromised, that data, that intellectual property, the secret source of your organization, isn't going to be able to be recovered back onto a rogue device. And this is protected through multi-factor authentication. And of course, we work with the major vendors. So it's just that additional layer of friction for that bad actor in the environment. And the next piece is really expanding on the search capabilities of the product. So when it comes to e-discovery requests, this could be initiated from a litigation case. This could be triggered by a recent audit for IT, for example. And they may be coming to you trying to track down vital information for an end user relating to a particular project on Teams, on SharePoint, on a site. You need to be able to not only recover from your latest restore point, which is the default on our solutions, but you need to be able to ensure that you can very quickly siphon down and you can focus on a particular time frame to track down that data for that smoking gun. And then you need to have that trust in that solution, that you've got those multiple restore points, that we can export it back to a different location. We can download it locally. We could recover into a different mailbox or a different site, whatever it may be. And that's all around the e-discovery.
Yeah, I think it's also about it's sort of giving people it's the flexibility. Absolutely, I think previous backup solutions were just that. I mean, you're the same age group as me, so you know backups were we just back up everything, probably to tape or to another hard disk, or just take a mirror or that, and that's the backup. It's done. But that's not sophisticated enough these days, particularly from a security point of view, because it's all in one place. Therefore, it can be compromised. And how do we access that? How do we query it? That kind of thing. Particularly if it's unstructured. These days, it's more about let's structure that data. Let's look at the value. Let's look at its lineage. All of those kind of things. So we end up with a package of data, which is very useful for us, but we know it's safe and backed up, and we can query it if we need to. And again, we can extract information back to locations or change formats. We can do all of that because we're extracting the value from the data. It's not just like a sea of stuff in a business, which we back it up, but we can't really use it. And the whole idea of this, because 365 is so important as a core service for a lot of businesses, is to, well, no, let's make that data, an asset. And if it's an asset, well, how do we query that? How do we back it up? How do we recover? And that's why these services are really now, I think, core to any business tech stack. You have to have this as a core application if you're going to move forward with your overall business strategy, because that's really what it feeds back to.
Yeah, absolutely. And one feature actually, which I didn't touch on, and I'm sure I'll touch on in the demo actually when we come into it in a moment, is a very useful tool within our Microsoft 365 backup solutions, be it in which of the three flavors you go for.
Sure.
It's a very quick comparison between what's in your backup based on the chosen time period for that recovery point and comparing it to production. So it enables you to quickly scan down and identify what's been removed from that inbox, what's been removed from whatever location, and then you can go ahead and restore it.
It's so vital. It really is.
Brilliant. And David, I'm pleased to announce it's been out for a few months now, and we've had significant success. This is possibly one of our fastest growing solutions we've had in recent years.
Not surprising, really.
Absolutely. And it's around Veeam Data Cloud for Microsoft 365. So when we did the comparison and we were looking at the software only and then the BAS approach and then our Veeam service, our Veeam service provider offerings, this sat in the middle. And this is around having a solution which has been configured. It's in line with Veeam best practices. It's managed. It's looked after. Most importantly, it's scaled and it's patched by Veeam, and it's one throat to choke. So if there's any challenges with it, you can reach out to Veeam because it's our own offering. And it will protect your core Microsoft 365 workloads. So this is Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams. And most importantly, it's all through a very simple, easy to use user interface, very slick operating model. And it's going to give you a number of different options when it comes to recoverability, as we saw on the previous slides. But actually, if we go into the details and we start looking at what's covered in Veeam Data Cloud for Microsoft 365, the most important thing to highlight here, David, is that it's unlimited storage. And this is irrespective of how long your retention requirement is. So you may have very tight governance requirements or compliance requirements where you need to keep data. If it's medical records, it might need to be for the life of the patient plus X amount of years, or even a pet, for example, or it could be financial information, which again might be relating to GDPR. So it might be 7 years, it might be longer.
Indeed.
You need to ensure that you've got a solution which is going to meet those requirements. And with the Veeam Data Cloud for 365, we will look after, this is all the Veeam managed infrastructure. We will take care of the backup server, the proxies, the storage, the networking, the compute, the updating, and most importantly, the entire security to ensure that it's safe and that you've got immutable copies of your data. And when it comes to the user side of things, with a Veeam Data Cloud, you can still create your backup jobs. So you can still create that blanket catch-all approach, and you've still got the granularity, all the different options around excluding users, creating a separate job based on a group or a separate workload. You've got that flexibility. It just means that you've got that quick time to live, that turnkey solution, taking care of all of this infrastructure, and you don't have to think, actually, how much storage am I going to use? You don't have to worry about, as with many cloud offerings, you don't have to worry about, is there egress costs? What's the API charges? Are there any considerations around that?
Yeah, because that's become an issue for a lot of businesses, hasn't it? That we're looking at cloud applications, and the costs involved because we're not quite sure how we're going to evolve that forward. That's out of focus, but that's not good for business, of course, because what's it going to cost us? What's that going to look like in 6 months, a year time, 3 years time? We need some kind of predictability, and if we're looking at that from a security and data point of view, we absolutely want to keep an eye on that, because data is absolutely growing massively within businesses as a tangible asset. So protecting that, we want to have a very good handle on the kind of infrastructure we want. And I think there's a question about infrastructure, I think, which is interesting. Then also, obviously, the cost base, of course, but also what we can do with that. This whole idea of flexibility again. It's not vendor lock-in. It isn't. That's not what this is. In fact, it's the opposite. It gives you the flexibility to be able to grow when you need to. Because if you do suddenly have to really pivot in some cases, then these systems can move with you. That's the power of these kinds of flexible applications.
Yeah, certainly. And on the note of the vendor lock-in, as with all Veeam solutions, what you've come to expect, we avoid vendor lock-in. So if you need to think as well around an exit strategy, don't you? We hear some of these horror stories around organizations being charged vast amount of money, not only on services, but around transporting that data as well. What does that look like?
Right, so, yeah, absolutely.
And certainly with Veeam, we avoid that. So if you were to come out of our solution, we would give you the ability to access that data through what we call a community edition license. So you can actually spin up an instance of Veeam Backup for 365. You could connect to the storage repository from this solution, and then you could access that data even after you've disconnected from the offering.
Yep.
And there's a number of different things I would say here, David. We've touched on security. Certainly that's a consideration, as with any IT infrastructure or offerings nowadays. But with the Veeam Data Cloud, not only is the solution ring fence your data, at least, it's in separate separate repository. It's in your region of choice as well. So as part of the onboarding, we discussed that.
Okay.
The data is protected using an Azure LRS, which is locally redundant storage, which means there's 3 copies of your data in the same physical location. So again, you've got that additional layer of security, compliance, meeting those requirements. And then from accessing the data, we've got comprehensive role-based permissions as well. So we're coming to the demo in a moment, and you see the amount of granularity we can do to this, to the extent that actually you can exclude, for example, someone being able to access the body of an email and maybe just the subject lines or whatever it may be. And again, you've got full auditing. And we've also got visibility from an e-discovery standpoint around what's happening with your overall Microsoft 365 environment. So we'll be able to show very quickly in the dashboard if there's any inactive user licenses which you can deploy elsewhere to save money. And then also, for example, if there's any high-hitting users utilizing a huge amount of storage, so maybe they're not in line with IT policy. Maybe they're bringing their own data, their own personal data, their songs, their media.
Yeah, sure. So it's got that bird's eye view, isn't it? Let's pay attention to what's happening in our particular 365 space. And it's going to highlight. I guess we'll see this in a second, but the power, of course. Then he highlights, what's happening over there? What's going on there? Why are we seeing lots and lots of maybe the environment there's changed, or there's something going on? Without this kind of solution, you're not going to see that. That will just carry on, and that could be a huge security issue if you're not paying attention to that, because it's the usual thing. If you can't see it, you can't fix it. And being able to see that right across the 365 environment, and peace of mind, absolutely. But it's also early warning, isn't it? It seems to me that you're pinpointing what's going on, and I think so. Well, let's go and have a look at that, because that's been highlighted to us. We weren't aware of that. What's going on with that team? Why are they data hogs? What's happening there? And that's a very useful thing for prevention.
Yeah, certainly. So just before we come on to the demo, David, just to conclude, with the Veeam Data Cloud platform, you've got unlimited storage, unlimited retention, so you don't need to worry about it. And again, we're looking after the software, the compute, the network, and the backup infrastructure. So all you need to worry about is ensuring that your backup jobs are in line with your business requirements, so the schedules are set accordingly, and that you're recovering data as and when required. Okay.
This is the sharp end, I guess. Let's see. Let's actually see how this actually works in practice. I think that's going to be a very, very useful thing to actually see. We've talked about how the setup is, the theory, but this is actually how it actually, in reality, this is how your business would actually see this if it was installed. Yeah,
certainly. So what we have here, David, is this is the Veeam Data Cloud. So this is Veeam's backup as a service offering. This is the dashboard you'll be welcomed with when you sign in. And after a very brief initial onboarding process, which you would talk to one of our support engineers, they'd get your account set up. It'll be set up in the region of choice, so it's in line with your requirements.
Indeed.
You're going to see a very quick overview of what's happening with the environment. So on the top left-hand side, we can see how many restore points have been taken. What's the overall look of your backups? Are they successful? Are there many which are failing? When was the last one? The next section is around how many users are we protecting? So have we got a backup policy in place to cover all of them? Maybe there are some excluded in some of those scenarios we mentioned about earlier.
Indeed.
And then this is the part around retention. So again, we need to ensure that if you have got a 7-year retention, that data is not going to be compromised. Someone can't delete it, and that's certainly all achieved through immutability, which is in the Veeam Data Cloud platform.
Indeed.
Now down here on the left-hand side, in fact here as well, this is a very useful tool, and this can take a little while to work out within Microsoft 365 if there are any inactive users. So you can choose here on what the criteria is, if it's 7 days, 30 days, or 90 days. And this is a small lab environment we've got set up. We can see we've got 16 users, 5 of which are inactive. So actually what we can do is we can take these inactive Microsoft 365 license and we can redeploy them elsewhere in the environment without having to spend additional money. So you're getting straight away out of the box, you're getting value out of the solution.
That also links back to that old security issue when someone leaves the business or something. Who remembers to switch the account off? Nobody, really. That account can be open for years in some cases, and of course that is an open door for the threat actor potentially. This shows you, if you know precisely how many licenses or how many people you should have with a license, that number should be what you expect it to be. And if it isn't, then again you can take action. But likewise, if someone does leave the company, then you know that there's a license there which can be redeployed, which is a huge gain for a company of this size, as we're showing here. But you scale that up to a corporate, for instance. That's a big number. That's a lot of licenses which you could redeploy, and that will affect positively your bottom line. Absolutely.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, we've got many. Yeah. Oh, I think I've got a bit of lag there on my end. That's certainly right, David. And of course, with this offering, this is just a small lab environment which I've got here to demonstrate, which is a shame because we've got some dummy data here. But this would scale to an enterprise. So we have many customers globally with thousands of user accounts. So that certainly compounds, and you can imagine the saving when they're glancing here and there's hundreds of inactive accounts which they can redeploy. And on the right-hand side, this is a high-level overview of what's happening in the 365 environment. So this isn't the storage relating to the backup environment. This is highlighting who are these high hitters, who are the outlier users in your Microsoft 365 account who've got a significant amount of data. Now, again, to highlight, this isn't necessarily a concern when it comes to the backup infrastructure, because with the data cloud for 365, we've got unlimited storage. But certainly, it gives you something to go explore. So if there is someone who's storing 10 times the amount of data, it might be worth reviewing. And then down here, we've got a full audit trail. All of these sections I've showed you, for example, around the inactive user licenses, around the audit trail, of course, all of this can be exported out to a spreadsheet so you can manipulate the data as you choose. We can see here the number of different options which we're following. And I touched on earlier, for example, limiting access to view the email body. This user here, well, in fact, we've got several admin users, again, peers like myself remoting into this lab environment. You can see here that they've gone ahead and then they've chosen this end user's inbox and they've actually viewed the email of the body. And you can click on it, you can see further information. And again, back to that scenario with, for example, VPs, maybe you want to limit the restore operator not to have that ability. Maybe in the first place, not even be able to access those VP boxes. But second, if they are, you don't want them to see that intellectual property in the email, and you can limit it. So in this case, you wouldn't see it here because it would just be denied. So if we go back to the dashboard, so we've covered off the main dash, the overview of what's happening with the backup environment, benefits around having quick visibility of how many licenses are being consumed in the 365 account, and then the comprehensive auditing down here. And from a security standpoint, if we just expand on that role-based permission, so again, that's going to dictate on which Veeam offering you have. So compared to our conventional Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, this has got a lot more granularity when it comes to creating those admin user accounts or the restore operator.
Absolutely.
You can see here, this is an administrator. They've got, as you'd expect, God rights to the environment, even creating and managing user accounts. But actually, you can be really quite granular. You could lock it all the way down for an individual. So you could just do a template, for example, we have here for an Exchange restore operator. Or you could do individual users. You wouldn't necessarily go down that approach, but I myself am a Veeam SE, and you can see here I've got more or less full admin rights, but then I could decide, well, actually, I don't want one of my peers to be able to manage accounts, so I can disable that. And then if we bring it back up another level, David, and we go into our backups, I just very briefly, just to finish up, well, I guess we'll come on to a restore in a moment, just to walk through, let's do an example, and let's do a catch all backup job. So this just demonstrates how quick and easy it is to set up a backup job using Veeam Data Cloud. So we've got a number of different options when it comes to protecting the environment. The first would be, as the title implies, around a catch-all approach.
Indeed.
So we're going to back up the entire organization. I believe I've already got one of these created, so it may not let me proceed, but let's see. Okay, no, that's fine, so it's let me do that. So straight away, we've created backup job. The default schedule for this is to run every single day. So again, it goes down to yourself as an administrator, as an IT department, to understand what those business requirements are. We touched on what's that RPO, what's the RTO requirement, and that's going to drive how often we run that schedule. So is it going to be daily? Maybe you want it to be triggered at the end of the day, for example. Or maybe you've got much stricter requirements where you want to reduce that down. Well, we can tailor that. It's not a problem.
Yes, and again, I like the word tailoring. You can make personalized, bespoke versions of this. Slice this as wherever you want to. Yeah, back the entire organization up, or back up something very, very focused. It's entirely up to you. The idea of the whole system is that it's flexible to give you that kind of control. That's really it's sort of USP. That's kind of what really it's about. You decide what you want to do, and the system then can deliver it very, very easily.
Yeah, certainly. And if we just click on here, we've got this catch-all backup approach, and we can exclude certain workloads. So maybe you want to exclude SharePoint sites, for example, or we want to exclude certain users. Again, we could exclude those VPs in the organization, which might actually be under a certain group. We can do that. Alternatively, you could switch gears and you could do it another way around. You could create a backup job based on objects. So that's based on workloads, it's based on users, groups. So it's really down to yourself how you structure that backup. Okay, and then finally, David, we can move on to what do the restore options look like. We certainly touched on the slide deck around the vast amount of options, but if we just follow that same approach and we talk around, for example, the emails in the interest of time. So I'm an administrator, I'm logging on, I've got a request from Emmy, for example. Maybe Emmy doesn't have access to the self-service portal. That's not been enabled, but it's certainly an option. We're going to search through our emails, and then actually we can go here, and this is the feature I was mentioning about earlier. We can simply select an email, click on compare with production, and very quickly Veeam Data Cloud for 365 is going to compare what's in that chosen recover point, or that last restore point. By default it's the latest one, and it's going to compare what's in the backup compared to production. So we can see straight away actually this message is not in production, so it's already been deleted. And because I'm an administrator, I've got access to be able to view the actual body of the email. I can click on that, expand it out, read it, and then I can go ahead and restore that. We can restore back. As you'd expect, back to the original location. We've got a number of different options there. We can even enable it so as it shows as unread, so it's seamless in the background, and the end user will look no different as if it hadn't been deleted. Do it back to a different mailbox, which is particularly useful if a Microsoft 365 user's account has been deleted. It's a leaver, back to your scenario you mentioned earlier. Maybe the account's become tombstoned, it's past 6 months, so the account's no longer available at all. So naturally, if you need to recover individual items or an entire inbox, you can do it back to a different mailbox, so maybe back to their leader or back to a shared mailbox. And again, depending if you've got the correct permissions based on that comprehensive role-based permission we've got in Veeam Data Cloud, you could restore it locally, or you could go ahead and download it in the background if it were a big PST.
Yep, indeed.
So I think that's brought us to the end of the presentation and demo. So just to summarize, thank you very much for everyone's time. So with Veeam, you've got a number of different options. We give you the flexibility and the freedom of choice. Be it conventional software deployment, if you've got those strict data governance requirements,
Indeed.
or maybe data sovereignty. We offer Veeam Data Cloud, giving you a turnkey Veeam solution to protect your Microsoft 365 data. And then finally, we've got that vast ecosystem of partners out there to tailor a solution to meet your requirements and then wrap that services wrapper around it.
Well, I think that's given us a very good overview, I think, of how the system can be deployed pretty much across any business. I would like to ask you about, I guess, legacy systems. I think a lot of businesses, maybe incumbents in the industry, may say, well, can our infrastructure be, I guess, be updated, or can it handle this kind of these kinds of backup systems? So I guess I'm really talking about deployment. So could you talk a little bit about deployment and how, we want to do this, absolutely. We're happy to let Veeam do this for us. Could you talk a little bit about the sort of actual deployment route and how we go from, having maybe not a solution like this to having, this actually installed. So how do you actually go about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing is, what does the deployment look like? So are you going down the software only route, in which case you're going to be responsible, or we certainly got partners out there which can help size, design, architect the solution. Sure. They can help you procure the infrastructure. So that'd be the first route. Okay. The second route would be around our Veeam Data Cloud platform. So if you're wanting to move forward and you want an as a service offering, because it's all cloud-based and it's all looked after by Veeam, there's no infrastructure on site. So to your scenario around a legacy environment where you've got concerns around, for example, resources, you don't have additional resources to spare, maybe wanting to come out of physical data centers, so no longer is it relevant to have that on-premise, then certainly Veeam Data Cloud would be the ideal platform for you. In which case, if you're interested in moving forward, there's a QR code which is available just here. You can scan, or you can go to veeam.com. You can go in there, look at our Microsoft 365 solutions, fill out this simple request form, or contact your account manager, and it will route through to a local resource who will be able to discuss your needs, understand your needs, best guide you to the correct solution. And then equally, if you're wanting a more tailored approach, then we can certainly give you advice on who would the best service provider in our fast partner community would be to move forward.
And the final question I want to ask you is, I guess, something that is absolutely front of mind for all businesses. I think they've changed the way they do business. I guess I'm talking about remote working, remote teams, etc. This whole idea of endpoints and what does that look like? It seems to me this kind of system solves that issue, because if you do have mass remote working going on, and probably every business that's listening to this does to varying degrees, how do we do that? How do we protect the endpoints? How do we put security in place? More importantly, everyone that's working remotely, of course, is moving data around. And how do we back that up? How do we secure that? Either on their devices or when it's coming back to our cloud-based systems. Now, again, I imagine because you have that the three-option approach, again, talk to us about what does your endpoint look like? How is your business structured? Let's talk about where the data actually is. It could be on various endpoints. And then we can really bespoke a solution so it covers the on-prem, hybrid, and absolutely your endpoint users.
Yeah, certainly. So if we're answering that question in the interest of Veeam Data Cloud for Microsoft 365, there wouldn't be any infrastructure you'd have to worry about. So that wouldn't be on any of the endpoints. You'd just simply be accessing this solution on a web browser. And the data would be encrypted, end-to-end encryption. The data would be encrypted in transit. It would be encrypted at rest. So you know that if any data if there's a man-in-the-middle attack, for example, that data is not going to be compromised. The data is going to be stored, again, in your region of choice, which is going to be a secure, segregated infrastructure just for yourself. The data data repository rather. But then from a much wider, broader offering within Veeam, so Veeam have been in the market for many years. We have mature offerings from protecting your data from, for example, on-premise, physical, virtual workloads, VMware, Hyper-V, different hypervisors. We provide offerings around protecting, securing those client devices so we can back up that data either locally or back to a central repository. We also have offerings which can seamlessly integrate into the same infrastructure and protect your cloud workloads as well, whichever hyperscaler of choice that may be. And then we also have offerings around containers. So more and more organizations are starting to explore the benefits around microservices. Indeed. So the likes of Tanzu, Kubernetes. And we certainly have offerings around protecting this, but not only around protecting these environments. At the forefront of Veeam solutions, it's all around flexibility and mobility, and it's avoiding, like you said, that vendor lock-in as well.
Super. Well, unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time, Blake. I think we could have probably gone on for another hour at least. I think it's fascinating. I think data backup may not be the sexiest thing out there in IT, but it's absolutely essential. Security, how you're going to do all this kind of stuff, recovery. Absolutely essential. I think we touched on all of that. Really like the idea again that it's a three option, which you can then choose to fit just what your business can do for you. I think that's ideal. As I said, unfortunately, everyone, we've come to the end of this fascinating presentation. I'll show you've all gained many insights into how you can enhance your business's Microsoft 365 backup process. So to learn more, please do visit Veeam, who can assist your business with more information and also start your road to maybe better and more sophisticated, more applicable Microsoft 365 backup. So until the next time, it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from Blake.